Hello and welcome back, adventurers. This is Captain TTRPG, and today we're talking about Pathfinder 2nd Edition.
Hello, adventurers. Welcome back. I'm so happy to have you here with me again today. So, not everyone's looking to play the righteous, inspiring, positive team player, right? We don't all want to be the Bard or Captain America, for that matter. Sometimes we just want to let power take over. Sometimes we need to lean into the dark side. That's exactly why today our build comes from a galaxy far, far away. Darth Vader is often considered one of the greatest cinematic villains of all time, and for good reason. Not only is he imposing and persistent, stronger and more skilled than our protagonists, at least at the beginning and sometimes in the other movies, but he also has a great backstory himself. There's a redemptive arc for him. He's just an amazing character all the way around. For those of you who don't know who Darth Vader is, really, don't lie to me. You know who Darth Vader is. I'm not going to go into that. The question I can see people thinking about, or potentially writing into the comments, assuming people write in my comments, iffy, is how we're supposed to build an antagonistic character such that he fits into a team that's not evil. And I think while we go through the build for this character, you'll see how we can do that. But it does play back into his kind of redemptive arc and the dark side having a hold on him, but him not being entirely that person. And so as we go through this, yes, there's going to be a lot of that dark side in this build, but just keep in mind that you can play the character how you want to play the character and understand who he is, even though he may use these tactics that maybe don't always fit the group's personal flavor in every possible way. That might as well be a segue into the build. Let's dive in.
All right, let's dive into this build for Darth Vader. Gonna go ahead and choose our new character here. Gonna go ahead and get started with our default options. All right, so let's go ahead and change the name, and we will go ahead and we'll save it to Google Drive. Fantastic. So some things to keep in mind as we get into Darth Vader here. We are using the dark side of the Force. So nothing we're building here is about being lawful good, but we might still be going down that kind of path, only on the opposite side of things. So with Darth Vader, we have human. Again, I'm going to recommend everybody play around with things other than a human. I just do it because it applies best to the character itself. I will get into character builds where they aren't human by default, but for Darth Vader, this is where we're starting. There are some interesting choices here, though, on Android if you want to take them. So if you're interested, I'm trying to keep it more kind of straightforward, but I would say that you have a really good choice here with Android, given Darth Vader and where he ended up. All right, for a background, I'm going to go all the way back to when he was young Anakin Skywalker. I'm going to make him a driver just because I think it's kind of funny to lean back into those pod racing days. So we're going to take that. And for the class, I think fighter could make complete sense here, but I think we're actually going to be better with a champion. And this is because of the subclass we're going to choose. So we'll get into that in a second. But I really do think champion is the way to go. He has a religion in a way, right? We are talking about the Force, and he follows the dark side. So we do have that. As far as a specific deity within Pathfinder's pantheon, we don't necessarily need to worry about that too much at this exact moment. But following the dark side, yes, I would say champion makes a lot of sense. So while normally I'd do some of these other choices, I'm going to talk a little bit about why we chose this. And this is specifically because we want to go with the obedience cause. Now notice with obedience, we get Iron Command. So when an enemy in your aura damages you, you get to kind of put them in their place. You command them to either kneel in obedience, or if they refuse to, then they pay the price and they're going to take some serious damage. This feels very Darth Vader to me. How dare you think you can harm me? You either give up now and do as I say, or you're in for a world of hurt. And notice that the refuse damage is pretty decent. It's 1d6 mental damage, but it grows over time. And at 19th level, this is 6d6 as a reaction. So this is a lot of damage if they don't want to follow your command. And if they do, even better. They're dropping prone as a free action. So now they're prone, and that may completely disrupt their turn. So this is why I want to go champion, is really for the obedience cause. All right, so let's go ahead and come back up now, and let's jump into our ability score boosts. We've got strength. I'm going to go with charisma. Remember, charisma doesn't mean everybody likes you and they want to listen to you. He's very intimidating, right? His presence itself is intimidating, and that intimidation can be brought through best with charisma. So we're going to really lean into those lines. So high charisma, high strength. We're also going to take a good constitution here. And I would say, whether you want wisdom or dexterity might be fair play. I'm going to give dexterity, and then we may lean away from that as we go further, but that's to kick us off here. All right, let's go ahead and jump into our, we got our skill training here. I'd say athletics makes a lot of sense. We see that with Jedi training in general. And we've got intimidation and deception. Now, in his deity skill, he's going to get intimidation. So we're just going to go ahead and take deception. And then in the deity skill, we'll give intimidation. So that all fits nicely. In heritage, I generally just go with versatile human if I am human. This will allow us another general skill. And I'm going to go ahead and make sure to click on general skills. I'm going to go ahead and give incredible initiative. He wants to start things off. He wants to go first. He wants to get things done. So we're going to go with that. With your ancestry feat, I'm going to go with, and again, this is pretty common for me to go with humans, is natural ambition. This will give us another level 1 class feat. There are lots of interesting choices for class feats. I like Iron Repercussions, because this relates to your Iron Command reaction, and this will give it lasting consequences if they refuse to kneel. Persistent damage can be really painful, and getting to do persistent mental damage is incredible. This is a huge buff for your reaction that you get at level 1. And we're going to come down to our class feat here. Some interesting choices, I would say. Whether you want, Splinter Faith could be interesting, having, gone between, the light side and the dark side. I think there's some plays there. Defensive advance, I wouldn't go because they're shield related. And you're really not going to be wielding shield. No surprise, with Darth Vader, we're wielding a lightsaber. That's all the shield you need. So I went with Deity's Domain. This is actually going to give you domain spells. And remember, your deity, for all intents and purposes here, is really the dark side itself. So on Deity's Domain, then, there's these, if you haven't seen these from Cleric or from other champion builds, these are the different domains that have domain spells associated, and these are deity-related domains. In this case, there's a lot of interesting options, but it feels like Tyranny needs to be our go-to. So this is going to provide us a focus spell, and it's a touch range focus spell where you touch a living creature, and you're going to try to make it obey. In this case, you're going to stupefy the creature, which can be very dire for certain types of enemies. All right, we've got that. Now we've got our champion's consecration. We are going with Unholy Aura to fit the dark side. And for devotion spells, I'm going to go ahead and go with Touch of the Void. So you can just go right in there and deal some decent damage to living creatures. I know we don't deal with a lot of undead creatures necessarily in this world that Darth Vader comes from. That galaxy far, far away, not a lot of skeletons walking around. So really this is about harming a living creature with void damage. All right, that is already a pretty solid level 1 build, but as I like to in these, I'm going all the way up to level 10, and we'll probably move a little more quickly now that we got level 1 built and you kind of see where we're going. I will always use free archetype in these builds because I suggest it anyway. So moving a little more quickly, for level 2, we've got Resilient Mind, strengthens your own mental defenses. He shouldn't be easy to take over, it's kind of what I'm getting at. This matters a lot though. This is our free archetype, and I think there's a lot of great choices. I'm going to lean into the Force here, the dark side of the Force. I'm going to give him Cathartic Mage. This I'll let you look into deeply on your own. You're letting your emotions dictate some spell abilities you're going to have. Now with this, you have to choose two things. You have to choose your emotion and then your tradition. So on your emotion, this one has to be hate. I really feel, I mean, you could go with fear, but that doesn't feel quite right with him. This feels very much a hate side of things, or anger potentially, but we're going to go ahead and take hatred. On our mage tradition, we're actually going to go with occult here. And this is partially because a lot of your telekinetic-like spells fall under the occult tradition, and that's a lot of how the Force presents itself in our films. So we've got all of that. Now there's a lot of details on how Cathartic Mage works. I don't want to make this an hour-long video, but your emotions are going to provide you certain benefits. You're going to be able to use them to make yourself more powerful, and then you're going to have to calm yourself down back again eventually as well. Skill feat here, leaning into intimidation. He can intimidate just by his presence. I know you can't actually see his eyes, but that's kind of part of it. So intimidating glare just means I don't have to share a language with you to intimidate you, and he intimidates everybody. All right, jumping down to level 3 here. Let's go ahead and do our skill increase. We're going to boost up that intimidation up to expert, really lean into that intimidation side of our skills. We got our general feat. I'm going to go here with Die Hard. I think you've got a lot of good options. Toughness. Fleet's always useful. You can do a lot of different things, but I'm going to go with Die Hard. I don't think you're going to see Vader dying very easily. We've kind of seen that before. He can take a lot of punishment. And Blessing of the Devoted. And I'm going to go with Blessed Armament, pretty much because we want to turn our weapon into the best version of a lightsaber we can. And we get to add one of the following runes to our lightsaber. And Fearsome is a great one for us. I'd say there are other good options here, but your attacks causing fear in your enemies is also a huge win. So 4. Really leaning into our subclass here, I'm going to go with Cruelty as our next class feat. When you're using Corrupting Touch, you sap Strength. You're really just leaning into how much harm you can do to somebody with the least amount of effort, and Cruelty certainly does that. Enfeebling somebody reduces their chance to hit with strength-based attacks and has other debuffs, so this can be really useful. All right, from your free archetype, we're in here, and we're going to go with our focus spell from our, and we'll look at what some of those are at the end of this, but our focus spell for, again, going back up here for what we chose here, our tradition, which is Hatred. And we've got a skill feat. Keeping on that intimidation train, we can take Intimidating Prowess because we have high strength and high charisma. So this will make it even easier for us to intimidate our enemies. All right, we're jumping into our skill increases. This time, I'm going to really dive into religion, keeping in mind that the religion for Darth Vader is the dark side. Vader has a lot of dark side knowledge. And for our ability boost, we've got strength, we've got constitution, we've got charisma, and we've got dexterity. You could, again, go wisdom. I don't know that I think wisdom is necessarily right, as he has been convinced that the dark side is the way to go, so maybe not the wisest choice. As far as ancestry feats, I'm going to go with Clever Improviser. This allows you to at least have some ability to use skills that you aren't specifically trained in or greater, and I feel like he's fairly resourceful, so I'm going to go ahead and take Clever Improviser. All right, jumping down to 6. This is something I often recommend. You could expand aura. I think that's interesting, but it does take an action. You can make it a wider aura. He usually wants to be up next to his enemies, fairly close anyway. Not right on top of them, but he does want to be fairly close. I'm going to take Reactive Strike, though. This just allows the use of reaction to make a single swing in case you're not trying to use it for your special reaction. That's a really great call. Definitely don't feel like you need to do this. In fact, you might want to go with something else. Smite, for instance, could be a really great choice, or possibly even Sunblade if you wanted to kind of change its flavor to make it dark. But I'm going to go ahead and take Reactive Strike here. Free Archetype, we are going to go ahead and take our basic spellcasting because it's the only one available, but we do actually want it anyway, so that's a win for us. And finally, our skill feats. Now, because we upped our religion last time, it gave us a few more options, and we gained Exhort the Faithful. And this is an interesting one where you can coerce those members of your own faith. You can look at this as trying to coerce Jedi. I think that's a really interesting choice that you wouldn't be able to take on a lot of characters or make it thematic, but on Darth Vader, it's perfect. Skill feat, we've got, guess what? Intimidation again. Boom. Just keep on that intimidation train. General feat, this time I'm going to go with something pretty straightforward. Toughness. Again, you don't want Darth Vader falling over easy. For level 8, I think there's some interesting choices. I might even go back and get Greater Cruelty or Smite. I think that we are going to use Greater Cruelty, though, because it gives us more options when we use Cruelty itself. And I think having more options is always better. Plus, Vader would choose whatever's going to be worst for his enemies. Our only choice here is Work Yourself Up. But again, this is a very interesting 2-action activity you can take. And you get to tap into your raw emotional energy, which is, it's interesting. Yeah, feel free to read these on your own if you wish to, or take the link I give you to make the build. Skill feat. This time we want to lean into our intimidation. Going to go with Battle Cry. Yes, you could just shout no if you want to get a laugh out of it while you're doing it, but also you can almost silently battle cry as Vader. Simply showing up would attempt to demoralize somebody in the area. So take that so you can demoralize right at the start of combat. Your skill increase here, going to keep going down that religion path, really get into the dark side. Ancestry feats, I'm going to keep going with our improvisation and make it incredible improvisation, so you get a bonus to those untrained skills. As you can see from our last page I opened, we have a lot of untrained skills, so this will really help us when we need to do something other than religion and intimidation. And finally, we jump down here at level 10. We're going to go ahead and look at our ability boosts. Pretty much sticking with the same things here. Finally get to our +5 in strength, which is nice. And don't really need dex anymore. You could say that this is more around when redemption comes and take a point in wisdom. See, wise is up. We're going to go ahead and jump into our class feats. This one I'm going to go with Radiant Armament. This is just to lean into lightsabers themselves. You don't have to think of it as this isn't a good thing. You have an unholy aura. This can be, evil along with you being dark side user. So we are unholy. We can add the unholy rune. This is leaning into our lightsaber as an extension of ourselves. Our free archetype. Notice there's nothing we can take. Well, there is another dedication that I think fits us really well, and that is the psychic dedication. This is something you could have taken right away, aside from the cathartic mage. I think psychic leans into both the telepathy and telekinesis sides, both a big part of being a dark side user. With that, though, we have to choose a conscious mind and a casting ability. On the casting ability, we're doing charisma. That's what we've leaned into. And for the conscious mind, you can look across all of these. There are different options here. We're going to go with distant grasp to lean into the telekinetic side. And the cantrip we will take will be, in the end, I'm going to go with telekinetic projectile. He likes to fling things that are around the room at people, and that feels right. So telekinetic projectile. Oh, forgot we get a skill training for choosing our new dedication there. We take occultism, which could have been something we leaned into before, but we really wanted to go that religion route. And our level 10 skill feat, we're going to go with Sacred Defense. It gives us temporary hit points. So it's a nice little defensive boost for a single action that we can do whenever we need to once per hour. So this will come up often enough that I think it's useful, and we can take higher checks at higher levels to increase the number of temporary hit points we gain. So that is all 10 levels of our build, but we need to finish out the rest of our character. So we're going to go ahead and move ourselves to level 10 to reflect it. You can see we've got a good number of hit points. We have a good fortitude saving throw because we're master there. Let's go ahead and jump into our defenses. We are going to put on some armor. He's got kind of an integrated armor. It's very heavy in its design. So I'm actually going to give us Bastion plate. We can use plate armor being a champion, and he has made himself very sturdy in this way. So we're going to give ourselves Bastion plate, and then because we are the level we are, which is level 10, we give ourselves the appropriate runes. I'm not going to worry about any other runes at this time, but of course make sure you're adding on other runes as you can for the level of potency rune you have on your armor. This is now giving us a 31 AC, which is incredibly high for level 10. So it's unlikely we're going to get attacked and struck down so easily. But let's jump into the offense side. And we don't have lightsaber as an option. That doesn't mean you can't make one. So I suggest you make a custom weapon, but because I'm trying to use more straightforward choices and people may not have the option to make custom weapons, I'm going to go with something that I think is at least close as we can. I'm going to go with a bastard sword. This is something that you can wield in two hands to increase the die size. We're going to go ahead and give ourselves that. We have some runes to give ourselves. We got our potency runes. We're level 10, so we can give ourselves a second potency rune. We've got the striking rune, the basic one here. This case, though, I am actually going to give us a few of these other runes because I think they make a lot of sense when you're trying to build this weapon that we want to imitate. So first one I'm actually going to give us is an astral rune. And why is that? Because it ties into spiritual energy. Now it's from the astral plane, but we can lean into it as spiritual energy from the dark side. It acts as a ghost touch rune itself, so it'll let you hit incorporeal creatures, but also you deal spirit damage, which I think is very, very fitting. The next rune I'm going to give us is Impactful. Impactful rune, this means that we're leaning into force damage itself. It fits on so many levels. You don't have to worry about an actual damage type like fire or acid or something like that trying to make sense. Just straight force damage, and you can push them away with a strike on a critical hit if they fail a save. But it's more about the force damage side of it. So we give ourselves Impactful. And keep in mind, because of our armament, we can choose one of the runes listed there to give ourselves as well. We are going to give ourselves the Fearsome rune, which means on a crit, they become frightened of us. They probably already were, but if they weren't, now they will be frightened 1. So we're going to go ahead and give that, yes, I know it's beyond the number. So here is our build. Here's our weapon. Let's go ahead and use the two-handed version. We see, we've got a 2d12 plus 7 plus 1d6 plus 1d6. It's quite a bit of damage on our weapon, which makes a lot of sense. And last thing I do want to jump into here for us to look at are the spells that we've got. Notice that straight away for our class, we don't have any. We've got these different archetypes and focus spells that we can dive into. So on the focus spell front, this is focus spells related to us being a champion. We have the Touch of Obedience. I'm not going to read through all of these, but they do, I feel, fit very well thematically. You still have a pretty good spell DC for these. You are expert in the spell DC on these. And you have Touch of the Void, doing your void damage, and of course, your Touch of Obedience fitting well. You've got your Telekinetic Projectile, which is a focus cantrip, so you don't actually have to use a focus spell to cast them. They are a cantrip, but if you amp them, it does use a focus point to do that. But you can just start throwing stuff around the room, and even if you just use the 6d6 base, that's not bad. 10d6 can be a lot of damage when you're throwing an object at somebody. And finally, there's Cry of Destruction that we also took. This is a cone, and this is just your booming voice is so damaging to their ears that it hurts. You can deal pretty good damage with this. if you've already dealt damage to an enemy this turn with a strike or spell, you get to increase the damage. So if you wanted to strike with your weapon and then do this, one of those enemies is going to be taking a lot of damage. So some very interesting focus spells for us here. When we look at our Cathartic Mage, we have choices for spells. You know what? For the heck of it, let's go ahead and fill this out real quick with some basic suggestions. We took Telekinetic Projectile before. Let's go ahead and take Telekinetic Hand. We can force choke some people. And level 2, we can take Telekinetic Maneuver. This is an interesting one, which simply allows you to use your telekinesis to move a foe or something they carry, so you can disarm somebody or trip them or shove them. I'm not feeling as confident about this choice, but let's go with Paralyze. I think that this fits well for kind of a distant, could be a force choke or some other mental effect that you're going to do them to harm them. So there you go. We've got some nice fits there. And of course, we have our Psychic archetype, which has no actual spells because we just took the dedication. And there you go. We built out Darth Vader.
And there you have it. As with all my builds, feel free to put in the comments with what changes you might have made. Are there mistakes I made? Do you feel like you would have built them entirely differently? I'd love to get your thoughts in the comments below, so please jump on in there. I am not your father, but please remember, adventure on.